Okay, let's jump into this deep dive. We're looking today at 2 Chronicles chapter 12.
Right. A really significant chapter focusing on King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, ruling in Jerusalem.
And it kicks off with a pretty major turning point, doesn't it?
It really does.
Hmm.
After Rehoboam gets his kingdom established, feeling secure, the text says he, and actually all Israel with him, they just abandon the law of the Lord.
Wow, okay. So abandoning God's law, and the chapter immediately links that to what happens next.
Straight away, the consequence is that Shishak, the king of Egypt, comes up and attacks Jerusalem. This is just 5 years into Rehoboam's reign.
5 years, not long. And this wasn't a small raid, was it?
Oh, definitely not. The scale described is pretty staggering. It lists 1,200 chariots, 60,000
So
horsemen.
60,000.
Yeah, plus this huge, uh, basically uncountable number of troops, Libyans, Sukkites, Cushites. They apparently just rolled over Judah's fortified cities and got right to Jerusalem's gates.
That's immense pressure, all tied back to that initial decision. So what happens when Shishak arrives?
Well, before Shishak fully acts, the prophet Shemaiah shows up. He's got a message for Rehoboam and all the leaders who've gathered there, sort of taking refuge in
A
Jerusalem.
message from God.
Directly from the Lord, yes.
Yeah.
And it's very blunt, basically.
Yeah.
You abandoned me, so now I'm abandoning you to Shishak.
Ooh. Cause and effect laid bare. No ambiguity there.
None at all. It makes that connection absolutely crystal clear.
But then the story shifts a bit based on how they react.
Exactly. This
Yeah.
is key. Rehoboam and the leaders, faced with this disaster, in Shemaiah's words, they actually humble themselves. They acknowledge the Lord is just. They accept the fairness of the judgment.
They own it. And does that change things?
It does. God sees their humility and tells Shemaiah he won't bring about complete destruction. He'll grant them deliverance relatively soon. His full anger won't be poured out via Shishak.
Okay, so disaster averted in one sense, but not entirely consequence-free.
No, not at all. There's still a definite cost.
Yeah.
The text is specific. They will become subject to Shishak. They'll be his servants.
And is there a reason given for that specific consequence?
Yes, and it's fascinating. It says it's so they can learn the difference. The difference between serving the Lord and serving, well, earthly kings. It's a lesson learned the hard way.
A harsh lesson indeed. And do we see the immediate impact of that subjection?
We do. Shishak comes into Jerusalem and essentially loots the place. He takes the treasures from the temple and from the royal palace.
Including those famous gold shields.
Yes, the gold shield Solomon made, that's explicitly mentioned, a huge symbol of the kingdom's previous wealth and perhaps God's favor.
And Rehoboam's response to losing those.
It's quite telling. He replaces them with bronze shields for the palace guards.
Bronze instead of gold. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? A visible sign of the downgrade, the loss.
It absolutely does. It shows how far things had fallen from Solomon's era.
So the chapter sort of summarizes things by saying Rehoboam's humility prevented total ruin.
Right. Because he humbled himself, the Lord's anger turned aside. But then there's that little phrase, also in Judah things went well, or there was some good in Judah, depending on the translation.
Interesting. So even amidst judgment, not everything was bleak?
Seems that way. Maybe pockets of faithfulness or some positive elements remained. The chapter also throws in some quick facts. Rehoboam reigned 17 years, took the throne at 41. His mother was an Ammonite, Naamah.
And it lands on a final, pretty critical assessment of him, tying back to the beginning.
It does. It concludes he did evil because, and this is the crucial part, he had not set his heart on seeking the Lord. It wasn't just one bad decision, but a fundamental orientation, or lack thereof.
His heart wasn't in the right place. The chapter also mentions other records.
Yeah, it says these events are written in the Chronicles of Shemaiah the prophet and Iddo the seer. And it adds that there was constant warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the king of the northern kingdom. So turmoil continued.
Right, and then it just wraps up with his death and his son Abijah taking over.
Pretty standard ending. So if we pull back, this chapter gives us a really clear, almost textbook case. Abandoning foundational principles.
Leads to pretty swift, devastating consequences. Subjection, loss.
But then genuine humility, owning the failure, it can, lessen the blow. It doesn't erase the consequences completely, but it avoids the absolute worst.
And that contrast is powerful, serving God versus serving human powers with very different outcomes and experiences. The bronze shields really capture that.
It definitely makes you think about leadership, consequences, and maybe the possibility of course correction, even when things look pretty bad.
So maybe something for you to consider today. How does this ancient story about abandoning principles, the visible cost of that, like swapping gold for bronze, but also the power found in humility, how might that resonate with choices or situations you face? What
Yeah.
does it really mean to set your heart on something foundational?